Hi there. I apologize for a little bit of background noise today, but I was in a little bit of a hurry and I just want to make sure that this message gets out there. This is the last of my What's in My Room videos. Now, there are things I'm not going to go over. I do have some old movie cameras here. I have a rather large up there 70mm that was used to take school photographs. You know, the old line them up and click away type thing. But today it's going to be digital. And here's one of my, I guess you'd call it an antique these days, one of my antique digitals. This is, I'm not sure of the megapixel count on this, I'd have to check. This is an ancient HP, Hewlett Packard. It has a Pentax lens, so it was probably one of the cameras that they had built along with Pentax. It took the ubiquitous compact flash from that era, and it's pretty much the standard form factor that most cameras afterwards took, other than the fact that it still had an optical viewfinder. So, I hope you enjoy what's coming up. I'll be going through a list of my digital cameras, and some of them are among the earliest, and some others are, well, a little bit later. I'm not getting into the newer stuff, the Micro Four Thirds or the Pentax Digital SLR, because, of course, those cameras I have spoken about here lots of times in the past. Enjoy! Okay, my first experience with a digital camera was this, a Kodak DC40. Now, the DC40 was also produced as an Apple product, and Apple gets credit for the first digital camera because theirs was on the market before Kodak built it for themselves. As you can see, it's a rather unusual form factor. You held it more like a pair of binoculars, and you look through this little viewfinder right here. This screen was just for your shooting data. It did not give you previews, nor did it let you review your images. There was no external card. Memory was internal. It took about 40 pictures. They were about VGA resolution, not very high resolution. Right now, there are a few issues with this camera. First of all, finding a camera, a computer, sorry, with the correct serial port. I would have to use an adapter. Secondly, the file format is a proprietary Kodak format, so I need software that could read it. And thirdly, well, it's only about VGA resolution, so not really that interesting. I have the case that goes with this one as well. And so it's a fairly complete kit. The first consumer digital camera from Kodak. As I said, Apple may have been first out the door, but it's the same camera. All right, so there we have our first digital. This second camera is actually the first one that we actually owned. This camera I purchased for my wife. We had been using film cameras exclusively. I was still stuck on film. This was a whopping megapixel camera. This was 1 full megapixel. Also, it had a screen where you could preview and review your images. It had removable memory cards. In this case, in the form of compact flash. Now, as you can see, you didn't use a very large card. The images from this camera made acceptable 4x6 prints for a photo album, nothing fancy. It had quite a few features actually, and the neat part is this, it had accessories. Here we have a 0.5 super wide angle lens. What this will do, of course, is turn your roughly 35mm equivalent lens into a far wider lens. It wasn't very sharp, and there was a fair bit of distortion, but the images were interesting to look at. Overall, a neat little feature to have with such a simple camera. But that's not all. If you wanted to go telephoto, you had this 2x lens, which doubled the focal length, and also gave you that little bit of extra flexibility. Well, things didn't end there. There were also a set of close-up lenses. Okay, this one is a +7 and a +10, and of course they could be used in tandem in order to get even more enlargement. So these made this camera a lot of fun. As I said, the resolution wasn't great, the image quality was acceptable, but only for, it was only really acceptable for small prints. But you could still use this today for posting on social media. 1 megapixel images are quite fine for most purposes. All right, so there we have it, the DC200 Plus from Kodak. My next camera is a Concord. Now this is a brand that didn't last very long. It's too bad. It had some very innovative features. This had a folded lens zoom, so that it actually had the sensor over here somewhere, and the lens came up and then turned like a periscope. It also had a viewfinder that opened and closed, of course, as you open and close the lens. It had a screen on the back. It had all the features you might want. The image quality, though, was not great. However, it was 3.1 megapixels. My wife bought this for me for a Christmas present one year, and I had a lot of fun with it. But later that year, I won a photo contest, and the result was that I replaced it with another camera. This one right now is no longer functioning properly because my son drowned it, and although it does turn on and some things work, that's about it. This, however, did take a trip to Guatemala, where my son used it on a trip that he took there with a relief group who were working at an orphanage there. So this camera has seen a bit more of the world than I have. So there we have it, the Concord eyeQ 3340 3.1 megapixel camera. Now before I get to this one, I should mention the fact that the Kodak that we showed you earlier, the Kodaks, were not zoom cameras. Neither one of them had a zoom lens. This was my Pentax Optio, which was a 3.2 megapixel camera, and the first one that I had that did not have an optical viewfinder at all. Instead, it just had the screen on the back. Now this camera took, again, compact flash cards, and again, they weren't very large. This one has a whopping 256 megabytes. It did not shoot RAW, but it did shoot selfies. So it was kind of one of the first selfie cams, but it also gave me low angle shooting and a lot of other neat features. I had a little Hoodman hood that would go over here to block out extraneous light. And of course it also had a zoom. These first two cameras had a zoom range of about 3 times. So they went from roughly 35 millimeter equivalent out to, well, probably close to 100. So anyhow, I really enjoyed this camera. Got some great shots with it. 3.2 megapixels in its day. Quite a capable camera. When my wife started traveling for work, I figured she needed a camera that was a good tourist camera. So I bought her this. This is the Fuji 2800 Zoom. It was only 2 megapixels. However, the image quality from this camera was fantastic. It had a fairly long zoom lens, a 6x zoom, and used, well, these are the postage stamps. Okay, this particular type of card, referred to as smart media, was actually not smart at all. It was more closely akin to the technology nowadays used on credit cards. So that's how it stored the images. But it had an electronic viewfinder, it had a power zoom, and overall was a dandy little camera that actually shot halfway decent SD video as well, standard definition video. Amazingly sharp. The images from this camera, despite only being 2 megapixels, have been blown up to some very nice 8x10 prints. So this was a camera that really served us well. Not only that, it got passed on to her parents, and they used it until her father, who passed away about a year ago, and then the camera came back to us. So now it's in my collection. So there we have it. A Fujifilm FinePix 2800Z, 2800 zoom. Before I get into this camera, I should mention one more thing. All of the digital cameras I've shown you, with the exception of the Concord, are still in working order. Now, this was an unusual sidestep, I guess you could say, a misstep in the history of digital. What they were trying to achieve here was an upgradable camera. So what they did, they built a camera body which had a separate sensor lens section. Now Ricoh did something similar to this later with one of their cameras. However, I don't think Minolta ever got around to doing any of this, because that was around the time when they were running into all sorts of problems. You could also connect a cable on here, and I believe this could be used as a webcam. It had the viewfinder and the lens and the sensor all in this one unit. This unit contained the flash, the batteries, and again, you have to sort of figure out the system. There we go. And another example of a compact flash card. 10. That's unusual. 10 megabytes. Okay, so that goes in there. This folds down. Batteries go in here. Closes up. This attaches here on the side, like so. And now we have a complete digital camera. Zoom controls were on here. There was a macro button over here, a display button. You had some buttons here that aren't labeled. The power switch is right here. And the control switch, the power button is right here. And there's your shutter release. Very nice little camera, actually. Resolution of this one was, I believe, somewhere in the order of about 2 megapixels. I'd have to check that. 1.5. It was a 1.5 megapixel camera. So there we have it. Another early footnote in the history of digital. And I hope you've enjoyed it. The Minolta Dimage EX with the Zoom 1500 attachment. And that zoom was from 7 to 21 millimeters. Well, that would be an equivalent, I would assume, to be a crop factor of, let's see, probably a crop factor of around 5. So that's probably around a 35 to 105. All right. Sorry for not having more detailed information, but some of these cameras are easily found still on the internet, and you can find out more information about them there. Well, I hope you enjoyed that presentation. You won't have to suffer through any more of these long videos of me explaining all the material that I have lying around in this room. But I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, be sure to click like. If you feel you would like to see more of my videos, then please subscribe to my channel. And of course, if you know anybody who'd be interested in seeing some of these relics that that I have lying around here, then share the video. Well, anyhow, bye for now.